we will hold a dance party for joy, but we were. And also, I want to congratulate one more time that our own community leader, Gigi Crowder, was recognized for her hard work as a Woman of the Year. So thank you, Gigi, and congratulations.
Thank you.
So just a little bit about this event. Again, my name is Susan Kim. I'm with the Family Justice Center, and together with Brentwood City Council member Faye Maloney, we have organized this event to raise awareness about mental health and mental wellness in our community. And I am really honored to be here with all of you and with our excellent panel of presenters. So after I welcome all of you, we are going to hear from Faye Maloney, Brentwood City Council member, and then we're going to have a brief presentation on suicide prevention by Caitlin from Contra Costa Crisis Center. After Caitlin, we are going to hear from therapist Jay DeFreitas about trauma and treatment options. And after that, we have Brentwood Police Surgeon Joe Noonmaker, who's going to talk about law enforcement response. So after we discuss these really important topics, we want to learn about community resources. That's why we have Gigi from NAMI Contra Costa. We have Sharon DeMarco from the Family Justice Center's mental health program. And then we have Dr. Rosa Maria Sternberg, who is going to talk about mind power in action. So that's a lot of resources we are going to share with you all today. Really information-packed meeting. I hope that this presentation and this workshop will be as informative as it will be inspiring. And I also hope that at the end of these workshops, you're going to have some action items that we could follow up on. So with that, I give you Faye.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for being here. My name's Faye Maloney, and I am with the City Council in Brentwood. Thank you very much for being here today and joining us. We're so glad you're here for this important workshop. Our goal is to create a safe and supportive environment where we can all learn, share, and grow together. There's so many different types of mental health challenges that we all face as individuals and as a community, whether it's generational trauma, childhood trauma, current trauma, whatever it is that we're going through. It's really important to know what resources and avenues we have to get to the next phase. And sometimes those resources aren't actually going to be just not just for the person that's experiencing mental health challenges, but it's also going to be for their support system, for their family, for their loved ones, for their friends. How do you support somebody that's going through something like that? So the key focus today's session is to help break down the stigma surrounding mental health, to normalize these types of conversations so we can all feel empowered to prioritize our well-being without fear or shame, and actually prioritizing our mental health. I hope that we leave you today with new insights, tools, deeper understanding of how to take care of yourself, or recognize the signs of someone near you that's maybe hurting and not talking about anything. We're all in this together, and as a community, I think we can support one another. So on behalf of City of Brentwood, I really want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank all of the panelists for their collaboration. I also would like to thank, we have a few colleagues that I have my colleague, Councilmember Jovita Mendoza, that's on the call. Thank you for being with us. We also have the Oakley Mayor, Shannon Shaw, that's with us as well. So thank you for being with us. And I am going to hand it over to my mayor, Susanna Meyer. She would like to say a couple of welcoming words. Thank you very much. Is my mayor on?
I think she's frozen.
I'm not driving.
Oh, okay.
What was that?
Would you like to say a couple of words to welcome the crowd?
Yes, I just dropped my phone. So sorry about that. I'm not driving, but I am sitting in my car. And unfortunately, not able to attend the whole meeting like I wish I could because Councilmember Maloney and I actually have a committee meeting starting at about 6:15, 6:30. So we are very, very grateful to the panelists. I do want to say I also noticed Councilmember Anissa Williams from Oakley on the line as well. And this is just speaking to the kind of collaboration that we need to do regionally as well as in our nonprofit and CBO partnerships. So I'm really grateful that we're doing this. I wish I could stay because frankly, I am certainly going through some things myself right now and I could use this kind of support. So I think it touches all of us. It touches our families or our friends or loved ones or neighbors. So I appreciate all of the time that's going into making this town hall work tonight. Thank you so much.
And I'd like to let all of you know this workshop is going to be recorded. So if you need to refer to it at a later time, we'll let you know how to do that.
Thank you, Susanna, and thank you, Faye. So now we are gonna go right to our workshop, the substantive portion of it. So we bring you Caitlin Coughlin from Contra Costa Crisis Center. Caitlin, are you ready?
I'm ready, if you are.
Yes, you are. Go for it.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Caitlin Coughlin. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the volunteer and training manager here at the Contra Costa Crisis Center. And thank you to Susan and everyone here today for creating this space for us to be able to come together, break down the stigma that surrounds mental health, and yeah, just provide a kind, loving, warm space for all of us. So thank you all for being here. What I'm going to speak on this evening is our agency's area of expertise, which is suicide prevention. I work with the Contra Costa Crisis Center, where we answer the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, which is a national hotline number, but we answer the local Contra Costa County area calls. So that's why I'm able to speak on this today. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share an example of an outreach material that we hand out at various, tabling events. Maybe you've seen this before. Maybe you want this. I'll put my email in the chat, but after today. But it covers the 6 basic steps of suicide prevention. You don't have to be an expert in mental health in order to be aware of when someone may be struggling with thoughts of suicide, and also kind of be empowered on how to step in and how to provide that support. And so the 6 steps, it starts with things that you may see, things that you may notice within a person, things to look out for, keep your eyes open for. And you've probably heard this list before. Someone who's struggling with mental health and thoughts of suicide may experience extreme hopelessness. They may be withdrawing from their loved ones. There may be some extreme changes in mood or behavior. Maybe they were previously gregarious and now they're kind of withdrawing and kind of that stereotypical vision of a person who's depressed, right? But it could also be the opposite side of things. Any sort of dramatic changes in one's typical mood or typical behavior is kind of a red flag. And the one that is kind of, I wish was in bold on this screen, is giving away prized belongings. That is a run, don't walk sort of situation. If you have someone in your life who's relatively healthy and they're starting to make arrangements for maybe like giving away their iPhone, making arrangements for, you'll take care of my pet, right? If something were to happen to me, that should be, all the alarm bells are going off, especially when paired with anything else on this list. The kind of next step and next things to kind of keep our eyes and ears open for are things that someone may say. Oftentimes, even in my work here, answering the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, it's really hard for someone to just open up and say that they're having these thoughts. They're having thoughts of suicide, right? Even when the space is kind of created for that. But some people will drop little hints that they're struggling, right? They may say things like, I just can't go on. It'll all be over soon. No one would care if I were gone. and I wish I could go to sleep and never wake up. These are all really common thoughts and feelings and things that people say when they're struggling with thoughts of suicide. Now, with that being said, it could be that they're just feeling these things, or not even having thoughts of suicide, but it's just something that they're saying or something that they're expressing. So that's why the next step is really important, and that's asking directly about thoughts of suicide. We don't want to make guesses. We certainly don't hear in answering the 988 line. And it's not an easy thing to ask, right? It's not a normal conversation starter. But really, there's no wrong way to ask someone if they're having thoughts of suicide, as long as you're asking in a way that's compassionate and kind, and kind of pointing out, like, hey, you mentioned that you felt that no one would care if you were gone, and so I'm wondering, are you having thoughts of suicide? And as long as you're providing context for why you're asking, and also asking in a direct way, asking directly, are you having thoughts of suicide? Kind of cut out any sort of doubt or anything like that. There's kind of that. I know when I first started in this line of work, I wanted to soften the question by saying something along the lines of, are you thinking of harming yourself? Which is an important question to ask as well, but it doesn't get to the root of the why you're asking the question, right? So we want to be as clear and direct as possible. So with those 3 steps, right? So we've looked, we've listened, we've asked. The next step is to express care. This is the piece where we're saying, I am so glad that, you're here in my life. I'm glad that, I'm here to support you, and let's make sure you're safe, right? Which leads us into the next step of reaching out. Who do you reach out to when someone is struggling with their mental health or thoughts of suicide? It could be any number of people. Of course, the 988 line is available 24/7. But let's say, it could also be any sort of trusted adult, right? If in a child's life, let's say, maybe a pastor, maybe a youth group leader, maybe they're already connected to a therapist. That would be a good person to connect with as well, to let them know, like, hey, I had this conversation with this person, or work in tandem with that person. Of course, if someone is planning on acting on their thoughts in the imminent future, like within the next few hours, contacting either the Mobile Crisis Response Team, A3 is the county team, or local law enforcement is going to be a good option as well, to make sure that someone stays safe in the immediate future, right? And then the last step is to follow up with them. It shouldn't just be a one-time conversation. It should be an ongoing conversation with that person, right? And I think that really communicates to that person as well that they're willing to engage in this awkward conversation again for me, right? And then it's also kind of doubling down, like, hey, we reached out to your therapist. Were you able to get an appointment with them, for example? So it doesn't have to be, hey, are you having thoughts of suicide again? But it can be, hey, it's been about a week since we talked. I'm wondering, how have you been doing? Were you able to get connected to that therapist? Were you able to talk to your primary care doctor, or whatever it may be, right? So those are the 6 basic steps of suicide prevention. Things to look for, things to listen for, how to ask, expressing care, reaching out, and following up. And that concludes my little portion for today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. I thought this was really helpful, and it was very short but impactful for me. Just listening to this, I actually had a family member who attempted to commit suicide, and fortunately, he wasn't successful. But there were some of these behaviors that you mentioned in your slide that I just remember. When you were just talking about it, I was like, oh, I remember he tried to give away all of his suits and clothes. So yeah, That was really helpful. We have a little bit of time if anyone like has like a brief question for Caitlin. Maybe we have time for like 1 or 2 questions. If you want to raise your hand. Oh, there we go. Yes, Rosa Maria, go ahead.
Hi, Caitlin. Great presentation. I just have a question about, do you offer support to family members as well?
That is a great question. I'm so glad you asked. Absolutely. So we get a lot of calls from family members, friends who are, either supporting their loved one through their mental health challenges, or they're kind of worried, hey, I think something may be up with my friend or family member. And kind of looking for guidance on how should I approach this conversation, consulting an expert, for lack of a better term, right? And that's an absolute great use of the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. So if you're worried about someone, you can absolutely dial those 3 digits, 988, and we'd be happy to kind of engage in that conversation with you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And also, Caitlin, if you could send out that card, then I could send the card to the group along with all the other slides that will be presented today. Okay.
I absolutely will.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm gonna go to our next presenter, Jade. Are you ready?
Sure, I'm happy to share. Hi, everybody. My name is Jade DeFreitas. I'm a local trauma therapist in Brentwood, California. And some things that are probably good for you to know about me. I've been in private practice for a while, and I've been treating trauma for a while, the last century, actually, which gives me a little bit of confidence then with regard to what I'm about to present to you, because I've been doing this for a while. So I'm going to give you a lot of information, and I'm going to keep myself to a strict time schedule also. I am considered a subject matter expert in something called Group EMDR, and I was published in that in 2023. You can see the cover of that book there, which can be found on Amazon. I was one of over 30 international authors that was asked to write for this project. And I'm really proud of that work. So that is published by the same company that published the EMDR International Journal. And I'm going to break these letters down for you to help you understand what those are. I also serve as a board trustee for the First Responder Support Network, and we run something called West Coast Post-Trauma Retreat in 5 places across the United States. And I've been serving for them for the last year. We are a working board and work hard in that capacity, and I'm really proud to be associated with them, not just as a volunteer therapist, but also on the board. And then lastly, I specialize in the treatment of complex PTSD from all over the Bay Area, and PTSD and trauma, but in particular for first responders. So that's just a little bit about my background there. And I've been in private practice since 2006. Something that I think is important to understand is that not all pain in our lives equals trauma. But when we're talking about trauma, we're talking about trauma staying with someone and affecting almost every area of their life in a negative way, whether it's someone's social life, emotional life, physical life, or spiritual life. And so while it's important for people to have a space therapeutically to be able to process stressful life events, we do want to not underestimate, or maybe water down would be a better term. We don't want to water down actually what trauma is, especially in our age of social media and TikTok. And it seems like everybody's self-defining as having trauma, which everybody, I could say, if you live long enough, would definitely have small T traumas in their life, but not necessarily big T traumas. And there's a difference. The other thing that's important to know is unresolved trauma is much more difficult for us to remember in words. It's definitely remembered, however, by the body. And so I'll be referencing Dr. Bessel van der Kolk a little bit later in his landmark book from 2012 called The Body Keeps the Score. So trauma at the end of the day is about a nervous system that tends to be stuck in overwhelm. And whatever happened in the past in a negative way feels like it's ongoing into today. The first time I learned that talking doesn't treat trauma, I was at a professional conference in San Jose, and Dr. Daniel Amen was our keynote speaker. Dr. Amen is a New York Times bestselling author, times 12, I believe, is his numbers at this point. And he actually has a clinic in Walnut Creek. So right in our backyard, which is amazing. And his claim to fame is that he has the audacity as a psychiatrist to actually look at the organ that he's treating versus doing guesswork, which is a lot of what our American psychology is based on. So his point to us as therapists is that had he taken a right instead of a left in medical school, he would have been imaging whatever organ he was studying at the time. And he chose to specialize in the brain. And so he actually images the brain, and he can show definitively what therapies are helpful, what medications are helpful, what supplements are helpful, all kinds of things just by imaging the brain. And he and his colleagues have imaged more brains across the world than anybody else. So what we know based on brain imaging is that talk therapy doesn't treat trauma. And that comes as an affront to most therapists, because we want to believe that we're going to be able to deliver something of substance and really change someone's life, maybe with some words that we use. But we really have to let go of us as therapists being the change agents and rely on the fact that people's brains actually, when given the space to make the change, can do that really well on their own, and be able to see life circumstances and be resilient in a really amazing capacity with cutting edge 21st century treatments. So we do know that unresolved trauma is stored in the deep limbic areas of the brain. And the deep limbic areas of the brain, based on brain scans, aren't accessible while we're talking. So there's an area of the brain called Broca's area. It's in the upper left area of the brain. I'm going to talk about neurofeedback a little bit later, but if I had someone in for neurofeedback that had a stroke and didn't have access to their words, I'd be training this part of their brain so that they could have some access to their words back. So as a result, we need therapies that don't rely on words, but can still reach those deep limbic areas of the brain that don't rely on words. So I mentioned Bessel van der Kolk earlier, and the fact that the body remembers trauma. And it remembers trauma using some specific areas of the brain, in particular the amygdala and hippocampus, deep in the brain. And unprocessed trauma tends to be mostly stored, those memories, in the right area of the brain also. And the right side of our brain is where our emotions are stored, and our beliefs about ourselves, and our intuitive parts and our creative parts of ourselves. So our job is to really actively link the left side of the brain, where our logics rule and our facts rule and our adult perspective rules, to the right side of the brain when we are reprocessing traumatic events. So our solution to that therapeutically, psychotherapeutically, I'll be specific there, is something called EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And it was invented in the 1990s by Dr. Francine Shapiro. And the great thing about EMDR is that it doesn't rely on words, and it incorporates some great elements of other therapies that are helpful, such as cognitive behavioral therapy and somatic therapy that really concentrates on the body's response to traumatic memories. And over 30 years of research, it's shown us that for single incident traumas, it is the fastest psychotherapy from point A to point B. I was originally called by a reporter, I think it was in 2015, maybe 2014, from a local magazine out of Carmel by the Sea, asking to do an interview with me about PTSD and a client. And I am as excited about that as nobody. Like no one in my industry wants to be contacted by the press. It's just not something we're open to with regard to our clients. Long story short, she said, let me just talk to you about this thing that you do called EMDR. So I talked to her about it. And when the story came out, it turns out that one of my clients had contacted her and said, you need to do a story about how my life was changed. So that client came to me initially vomiting every day before work, couldn't figure out why. From the first handshake to the last, it was 10 sessions, and their life was transformed. And what we ended up doing was treating the trauma that they experienced, the significant bullying that they experienced in high school 15 years previous. And that resolved all their present day symptoms. So for a 10-hour investment of time to save someone's job and transform their life, that was pretty amazing. EMDR has a lot of endorsements from around the world and is used extensively around the world. Tomorrow, I'll be meeting internationally with therapists that use group EMDR, getting updates from therapists on the front lines in Ukraine and also in England to see what they're doing. So that's a little bit about EMDR, and I promised that I would keep to my time. I want to also talk to you about neurofeedback, which is not actually a psychotherapy. So neurofeedback, however, is no less amazing and impactful for the treatment of trauma. And again, we're not talking about Band-Aids here. We're talking about actual treatment and what brain science shows us as working based on brain scans. So both Bessel van der Kolk and Dr. Daniel Amen, who are leaders in the field, endorse both of these pretty readily in their writing. So neurofeedback is brain training. It's like having a mirror on the brain in real time, and the brain is able to see itself in real time and learn to function as adaptively as possible. And we do an EEG every session, which reads someone's brain waves. So for example, if I were talking to you today and I could see my reflection in my Zoom camera and my hair were standing on end, I would be looking to see what I could do in the moment to bring this hair under control so that it was where it needed to be, which is similar to what EEG neurofeedback is doing for the brain. The brain is looking at itself from all kinds of angles in the moment to see how it can be functioning more adaptively. And it does it in an amazing way. It does it while my clients watch Netflix and movies and play video games. So a little history, you can read more about a great book written called A Symphony in the Brain by Dr. Jim Robbins. Neurofeedback first came to light in the 60s as NASA and someone called Dr. Barry Sturman were working together to try and figure out something that was going wrong in one of the NASA trials that they were having. And they were trying to figure out if there was a leak of rocket fuel into the cavity where the astronauts were, because some of them were having hallucinations. Long story short, Dr. Barry Sturman stumbled upon the fact that the cats that he had trained in neurofeedback had become seizure resistant, and he had used 7 of those cats along with, I think, another 43 to figure out what was happening with this rocket fuel. But he couldn't figure out why these 7 cats in particular were not responding and were not having seizures. And it turned out because he had trained them in neurofeedback prior to that, as he was experimenting, that he'd actually created a brain that was seizure resistant. That research was taken by a couple called Sue and Siegfried Othmer, who happened to be my trainers, and they expanded it with regard to seizure suppression in humans, and their work is published extensively also over the last 30 years. And sadly, Sue died a couple of years ago, but Siegfried's still very active in training. This whole concept is based on the brain's ability to grow and change. The concept of neuroplasticity and this concept of neurointerception, which is the ability of the brain to look at itself and monitor itself and change itself adaptively on its own. And it's amazing. Our research is phenomenal with neurofeedback. The American Academy of Pediatrics actually considers neurofeedback as a level 1 intervention for the best support treatment for ADD and ADHD. Equally, get this, equally as effective as medications for ADD and ADHD, except this is totally natural. So people learn this and say, why doesn't everybody know about neurofeedback? Well, this is a much less costly intervention. And given that most ADHD studies are funded by Big Pharma, and given the fact that Big Pharma makes billions of dollars, that's with a B, on the sale of ADHD medication, it would behoove them to not be huge supporters of this. And yet the little guys like us in our own private practices around the world are showing time after time how effective neurofeedback is for not just ADD and trauma, but also depression and migraines and a whole host of other things. We have, as a scientific community, roughly 150 to 200 studies every year since 2014 on the efficacy of neurofeedback. It's used, as I mentioned, for seizure disorders, migraine disorders, depression, OCD, mild and moderate TBI, PTSD and complex PTSD, anxiety disorders, insomnia, autism, learning disorders, peak performance for athletes and CEOs, and the list goes on. So what we're looking at in neurofeedback is a skill building model. We're looking to make every brain better, stronger, and sharper. So if there's any $6 million man fans out there, if you guys remember, if you're of my generation and can remember the intro to that gentleman, we are here to build him bigger and stronger and faster. And so it turns out maybe for some of my police officers, I don't want them to be as fast and actually need to slow their brains down a little bit. But we have phenomenal results with regard to who I'm using neurofeedback for. And I must say that I'm using both EMDR and neurofeedback for officers and first responders in our community. So there's a lot of optimal performance teams out there that use neurofeedback and haven't been shy about advertising that. 2006 AC Milan, who won World Cup, used neurofeedback extensively and credits it with one of the reasons that they won the World Cup that year. You can Google NFL players, NBA players, and Olympic athletes who also use neurofeedback to train for peak performance. So you're wondering, how in the world does this work? How do you train the brain out of trauma while watching movies? So I hook someone up every session. I do an EEG on them by just placing little sensors over in various areas of the brain that I'm training. The brain feeds, the sensors feed those brain waves into the computer, and the computer determines in this brain computer interface what is most adaptive, and it gives feedback on the screen to the person. And so what happens is the big TV screen starts to shrink, and maybe the color goes bad and the volume's difficult to hear. And then there's also a tactile form of feedback in someone's lap. And when the brain's not doing what we want it to do in that moment, all of those negative pieces of feedback come in. And then as soon as the brain gets it, that screen gets big, the color gets great, the volume is great. And that is the reward for the brain figuring it out. And this is all done unconsciously by the brain. So the only job the person has to do is come in and sit down and enjoy their show. And again, the training results get stronger and stronger over every session. So this is what it looks like behind the scenes. There's me on the right. There's my computer looking at the EEG in real time. And then I've got the treatment plan there on the right, and then my client sitting in the chair. You can see the electrodes, which is not a great name, by the way. It sounds like we're putting electricity into the brain. We're not. We're just reading the brain. But they are called electrodes, so don't let that scare you off. And then that's what he's watching. He was watching a car show at the time. So recording the EEG, and then the therapist sets the treatment plan from every session from this location. So you can find out more about me and my work. How am I doing on time? Oh, I'm so proud of myself there. You can find more about me at my website, brentwoodtherapist.com. There's my email for you, my Instagram, and then you can also find me on YouTube just under my name and a video I did for the Amen Clinics and Dr. Daniel Amen a couple of years ago. Phew, I'm done.
That was great, Jade. There was one question in the chat. Can neurofeedback be used for children?
Absolutely, yes. So even babies, not that I would use it on babies. So me personally, but my trainers used it on their grandson because they have a family history of seizure disorders. And so they have. So I've used it on pregnant women. I've used it, my youngest client, I think, was 4 on the autism spectrum. And again, it is phenomenal. It's a phenomenal intervention. In 50 years, we will know more. And in 50 years, insurance companies will actually have to pay for it on a regular basis. Right now, if you have a PPO and a kid with ADD, you can usually get reimbursed for some of your sessions.
Good to know. Thank you so much. Again, wonderful presentation. I really appreciate your work. And let's definitely stay in touch. And I think we are going to share your slides with our audience. Yes?
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. So now I bring Brentwood Police Sergeant Joe Noonmaker. Are you ready? I'm
ready. I'm here.
There we go.
My screen back up here. Well, I appreciate you all having me on here today. It's hard to follow that. It was a great presentation, and not that she needs any further endorsement, but I can attest personally to the EMDR treatment, as working effectively in my life. I definitely recommend it to anybody who any of that presentation spoke to. As far as neurofeedback, I have multiple officers in our agency that have used it as well, and I've had excellent results. So it's definitely something to look into, and we appreciate Jade here. So again, I'm Joe Noonemaker. I'm a patrol sergeant here with the Brentwood PD. I work as our peer support coordinator and also our wellness coordinator for our department for all of our staff. And I'm here, I think, today just to speak mostly on law enforcement's response to the mental health crisis that a particular person may be experiencing. And our first priority, first and foremost, is the safety of everybody on scene and the public in general. And that's where our mind goes initially. You know, is there any violence involved in the crisis? Is anybody who's in danger, if anybody? Typically, obviously, if somebody's in crisis, we have at least one person who is in danger. But we strive to quickly transition from, you know, the safety and security of the scene to how can we best help this person or best put them into contact with somebody who is trained and an expert that can help this person. And so we receive training on a continual basis on, at least on our end, how we can best evaluate a person on a scene who's in crisis, determine whether they are you know, a harm to themselves or to others. At times, you know, a 5150 hold, many people may be aware of the 5150 title. 5150 hold is a mental health evaluation hold that if someone meets the elements, we can put them in contact with a mental health clinician who can further provide resources. Now, there's times where, you know, we'll respond to a scene and a person may be in crisis to some extent, but not necessarily, you know, in danger of themselves or other people on scene. And so at that point, we provide resources, community resources that we've received, that we've worked closely with. The Contra Costa County Crisis Center is a great one. We use A3 very often, which is anytime, anywhere, anyone. And I may have switched the A's a little bit, but they're all there. That's a new resource that the county's offered, where we can actually call them and have them respond to the scene if they're available to see if they can help get the person in crisis the service that they need. And then on the law enforcement side of it, we actually have in this county something called the Mental Health Evaluation Team. And what this team is, they're made up of right now, a Pittsburgh police officer for our end of the county and a mental health clinician. If we come across somebody who is in need of further follow-up, we can actually send a referral to the MET team, the Mental Health Evaluation Team, and request that they respond out to the person in crisis's residence. And this team is set up to, you know, provide resources to the person in crisis and also to their family members in hopes that they'll receive further resources to prevent further crises. I would say that one of the more difficult parts of our job is that many of these resources that we have are optional. You know, if a person chooses not to take, you know, to follow through with the resources outside of the 5150 hold, we don't have really the ability to force the resources, but we can be persuasive at times. we try to be, obviously, in a good way. And our officers, like I said, receive continual training in things like de-escalation. We receive annual CIT training, which is a crisis intervention. We use active listening skills, and many of us have been or are negotiators in our department. And that's not only in hostage situations, but that can help us, you know, try to relate to people, to build rapport, and just help people in whatever situation we find them in. But again, our first and foremost priority is the safety and the preservation of life and safety, and then moving as quickly as we can into the resources and getting you all, the experts, in touch with the person in crisis. Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, I'm here. We're always here 24/7, but I'm here now.
Thank you so much. That was a really great overview. Also, you touched on some of the community resources as well. So that really is a good segue to Gigi Crowder from NAMI Contra Costa. And by the way, if you have any questions for Joe, you could also use the chat. And if we have a little bit time left later, maybe you could ask Joe some questions directly. But Gigi, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Thank you. I'm representing NAMI Contra Costa. There's 650 affiliates of NAMI across the nation. Here in Contra Costa County, we only have one, but if you would go to our neighboring county, Alameda, they have actually 4 affiliates that are recognized by our larger parent organization that's back east. It's started by 2 family members who recognized their loved ones were not getting their needs met in a way consistent with improved outcomes. So they got together over a kitchen table all over the country, and then they figured out their strength in numbers, and that's how NAMI, National Alliance of Mental Illness, was kind of developed. And so the first jobs that NAMI Contra Costa County did was educating professors not to blame the mom for their loved ones' challenge. And that's still a part of why we still have so much stigma associated with mental illness. So we provide free, non-clinical services. So a lot of times when a parent has a loved one who's struggling with mental illness, they know that our programs exist before they know that they pay taxes for a county-run program to support them. And our approach is to have a very warm hand, hold that hand, because when a loved one finds out that they have someone who's living with a mental illness, it's very daunting and they really don't know what to do. So often individuals who live with mental health challenges are experiencing a difficult time for themselves. So we see a lot of self-medication. And if you can imagine what it's like to hear voices and start having behaviors that's not coming for you, we should be more understanding about why a person might choose an illicit drug or alcohol to get rid of the symptoms. So NAMI's mission is to educate, and that's the type of thing we share. Educate, offer support, and do outreach so that people are more aware with, of course, wanting to reduce the stigma associated with it. I lean into the advocacy part. That's why I will mention here that 988 was named after Miles Hall, a young man in Walnut Creek who should have had a non-police response to his mental health challenge when he was experiencing an emergency. I'll call it emergency because that aligns more with the medical condition that he lived with. He lived with a medical condition. His family sought support for him. And because we criminalized what is a medical condition, sadly, we lost Miles, but his brave family and the supporters in Walnut Creek advocated and championed here locally. I saw her today. Assemblymember Rebecca Byer-Cahan allowed her staff to put a lot of attention into having that bill 988 named after him, a non-police response to a mental health crisis. And then in the county here locally is the design for the A3 program, anyone, anyplace, anytime. It's also not fully established with all, but there will be a campus in Concord named after Miles Hall, where family members can go and get the support that they need for their loved one. Many times when people live with mental health challenges, sadly, a part of the illness is for them not to be aware of it. So there's a lot of denial and a lot of resistance to treatment. And so at NAMI, the educational part of our program is to make sure that we're providing the skill set needed for the families to better understand what their loved one may be, dealing with. And it doesn't have to be a family member by the definition that we go to. We think of. It could be someone who cares about the individual. So we have programs for, adults, for family members of adults and family member of young individual. And I tend to lean toward prevention because the tools that were mentioned earlier, all of the tools that were mentioned earlier, we don't know enough about them. We haven't designed the psych emergency services to be equipped to handle all of the individuals who might show up there. And often these are not individuals who've had a history of mental illness. These are individuals who might be going through some life crisis or trauma. And at that moment, they need support. And too often what we hear at NAMI is that they're released before they get the necessary care. So when individuals come to us, We're equipping them with the skill set they need. We're doing it using a very culturally reflective team. So we have people who represent the Asian American Pacific Islander community, Latinx community, African American specifically community, and LGBTQ, and all of the communities, the BIPOC communities, where people should understand when people are in distress, they actually fare better with someone with like lived experience who can actually heal them in a manner inconsistent with the way they want to heal. I see my role at NAMI as connecting people to their purpose, despite whether they live with the mental health challenges or not. Like, we don't focus so much on the diagnosis as we do to what did you want to do if you didn't have this mental health challenge, and then connecting people to the resources that are often underutilized. The biggest challenge that people who live with mental illness have, and why family member calls us, is because the housing opportunities are not there. And so we in this country have a crisis because not enough people recognize this is still my loving child. However, they started experiencing a mental health challenge, and often it happens when they went away to college. And parents will get this phone call and then they recognize something's going on. It could be from the RA. It could be that they start struggling in high school, but something just doesn't click anymore for the individuals. And too often, because of the lack of understanding it's the unaddressed mental illness and then the behaviors that come from that cause a big strain in the family relationships. That's why we think the educational piece is so important, to educate families. And we know that once they have a better understanding, then there's more compassion for the fact that this is a mental illness. It's not, you can't blame the individual. You have to kind of get the skill set to work along with them and to partner really with them to get the help they need. Because our system has not been designed to meet the needs of the individuals, and we certainly don't do it for certain cultural and ethnic communities. We're in a county where 60% of the young people in our juvenile justice system, it's hard for me to say justice, they live with a mental illness. It's on paper, it's diagnosed. Not they do. And so I prefer treatment over incarceration for young people who have been struggling and we missed all the marks. They've had childhood adverse experiences. And this is not saying they didn't do the behavior, but they did the behavior because they live with a mental illness a lot of times. And so a more appropriate response to it is what we work toward at NAMI with the languages that we have made available. And we also, our foundation with our very low funding is built around volunteerism. We believe people heal through helping others. And so many of the people who take our courses will come back and then they want to give back by being a family to family. That's one of our more popular courses. They want to be a family to family teacher or a basics teacher. Because mental illness impacts 1 in 4 individuals, it's very rare for me to find a family that's not impacted. But it's our job to talk about it in such a way that we're reducing the disparities and we're reducing the stigma associated with it so that we can all get the support that we need when we have a loved one who's experiencing, this. And I don't glorify a mental illness. I know we're moving to this model of recovery. I work with some people who could take their meds and do everything that the therapist has asked them to do, and they still struggle with the symptoms of mental illness. So creating a toolkit for the individual is important too. So we have what we call peer-to-peer. It's a course that's led by people with personal lived experience. And we try and make sure that we have individuals doing these trainings that are reflective of the community. So we have peer-to-peer done in Spanish and in Mandarin and English. And then the cultural piece is also there, recognizing that some communities are more likely to be harmed when they live with a mental health challenge than other communities. We provide the CIT training, crisis intervention, as the officer mentioned. We try and take a team that's reflective so we can say, this is mental illness and this is what it looks like for this particular community. And here are the considerations that you should have. Of course, the most vulnerable person in a mental health crisis is that individual with the mental health crisis. That is the most vulnerable individual because they're in a position where they're having symptoms that they cannot control. And so them having behaviors that may come off as dangerous. So as we were developing the A3 model, we talked about law enforcement only being involved when there's an imminent danger. That would mean the person has a weapon or the person is going to harm themselves. So it's really important for us to understand, what mental illness is, but also what it's not and how we can treat it. So I appreciate what was shared earlier about the different approaches, alternative treatment approaches that we just don't embrace. We have worked and had sessions with Dr. Amen and tried to get, families who could potentially benefit from it, made aware of the brain scanning and how that could help. But we lean toward culturally responsive approaches too. Some of our individuals that we work with benefit greatly from the men's group where we have drumming. And so we're moving toward approaches based on what the individuals say would be helpful for them. And for me, I feel like I wouldn't be at NAMI anymore if I hadn't discovered Pilates in Brentwood, because that allowed me to do some very intentional breathing. And when you're doing this kind of work, you have to find the tools and build your own toolkit in a way that will, support you to first put your oxygen mask on. So self-care is really a big part of the work we also do at NAMI, teaching people how to put their own oxygen mask on before they can help someone else and have more clarity. So I would just suggest that individuals, if you have a loved one and you need support, to contact us at NAMI. We're going to provide you the resources based on how you show up and what's important to you and your approach to healing. That's critical. And a lot of our work now has been done in school campuses. I was at Los Positos Sunday with a group of young girls, because we know in the country that we're living in, with social media being such a big impact, that I was like, you guys might not like what I'm going to say with your moms in this room, but if we don't want to start having additional challenges, please don't get on any websites, because even I fall victim to, being too attached to social media. Most of us do. Some of us will admit it, others won't, but it's not healthy. And the longer you can stay off of it, the more productive you can be. But who doesn't post something and say, how many likes did I get? And so you just really don't want to put yourself in that situation. And before that, on Friday, I was at De La Salle talking to their student body about, suicide prevention and making sure they could identify an adult in their life that they can call on and talk to, just as was mentioned earlier, when they're having a difficult time. So at NAMI, we try and offer non-clinical services, but connect people to the most appropriate services that is individualized for them, their family, recognizing that those who have a support system in place have the better outcomes. So I hope I've completed my assignment here. Susan, and thank you all. I appreciate Brentwood for putting this together. I hope that, it will be at a time when we'll have specific services in each region of the county. If anyone would like to have a class, even a drumming group in Brentwood, we come to you. We have staff that, is 50 people now, and several of our staff live in Brentwood. So if I said, hey, who wants to do some work in Brentwood, hands would go up. So we want to cater to the need in the community. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Gigi, and thank you for your work. And I see that we have a number of people from NAMI here too. So let's send you some love. If you want to kind of use the reaction here at the bottom, send us some love to Gigi and NAMI. And we are so lucky to have you in our community. I'm so really grateful. So now we're going to move us onto Family Justice Center's own clinical program, and we have our clinical program director, Sharon. So Sharon, are you ready?
Yes, actually, I just wanted to see if I could share my screen right now. But I wanted to say, most of all, thank you for joining us tonight. And it's so hard to follow up Ms. Gigi and Ms. Jade, because as I'm a bilingual therapist and I've had about 10 to 12 years working with high risk Early onset teenagers, as Ms. Gigi said, they go off to college, they have these episodes. I've also had the opportunity to work with survivors of severe sexual abuse in our child advocacy centers here in the North Bay and doing forensic interviewing. And then most recently, I worked with an agency that worked with dual diagnosis, homeless, severely mentally ill clients. And so it's very, very, very crucial that we bring this awareness to our communities about the suffering of our loved ones. Again, like Gigi said, doesn't have to be a parent. You could be a caregiver. You could be a neighbor. You could just be someone who really genuinely cares about your fellow brother and sister. And so I'm very happy and fortunate to know that we have, that I'm now part of the Family Justice Center and can help Sassoon with providing these services to the community. And one of the big things that we're doing with the Family Justice Center is we have the ability and the privilege to have the Trauma Recovery Center in Contra Costa. And this is beautiful because a lot of our pretty much unserved communities, a lot of our Black and Brown communities who are struggling with trauma. Myself as a Latina, you know, mental health is a stigma. Not many of families want to say that they have depression, that they're struggling, you know, and this program really allows for the community to come together and be able to help these people who one time are scared to say that they might be considered weak because they do have a mental illness. They don't know how to cope, and sometimes, like Gigi says, you develop some maybe not unhealthy coping skills, and it's still a person, it's still a loved one, it's still someone's brother and sister, daughter, mother, you know, it goes down the chain. And so if we're able to provide these services to our community, it is so crucial. So at the Family Justice Center, we really want to spread the word about the services that we provide throughout the county. We do have clinicians, we do have partner agencies that help us with this. Right now, the Trauma Recovery Program is a brief 16-session program. We come, if you have referrals, it comes right through to our Family Justice Centers through our navigators who are our like champions to the community. They're our liaisons. They are the first ones to hear when something's happening on the ground, and then they refer to us at the clinical program. And then we do our steps and move forward with doing intakes and taking these clients in. But these are survivors of severe trauma, people who have complex trauma, people who have witnessed trauma in the community or had something happen to them, also witnesses of domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, all these things that are happening that you can't turn a blind eye to. It impairs your work, it impairs your school, it impairs your social structure, your social relationships with everybody else. And it does. The body does keep told everything that's happened to you from the moment that that trauma has occurred and how it impacts an individual through all the stages of their life. So it's always important to try and make sure that we are there for them, for people who struggle with mental health, and not let them feel like they're alone. So I'm so happy to be able to do this with the Family Justice Center and have this program available. We do have staff from the Family Justice Center, and then we have a great partnership with Familias Unidas in Richmond, who has bilingual clinicians also to help out. We do use the University of San Francisco's trauma recovery model, and we basically provide individual therapy, family therapy. We work really close on trying to meet the client where they're at. Building that rapport and helping them just pretty much put into words what's going on. I would definitely love to get a lot of our clinicians trained in EMDR. That would be phenomenal. I'll do a wink wink to Sassoon. Yeah, we do provide navigational services, and we do have a psychiatrist on staff. So not that we're pushing medications or anything, but if a client ever feels that, you know what, I think I need a little bit more, that is up to them. This is all client driven. It's up to where they feel that they're ready to move on in their treatment. But we do have that service available with our trauma recovery program. And like I said, this is primarily like a brief session, and we're trying to really get to the clients that have had trauma within the last 2 years. Try so that they initially, it's not impairing them in their day-to-day function. Some people are struggling just to get out of bed to go to work and pay their bills. And it's one of those things that we're trying to circle around our community and provide these services to them. So if anybody has any questions, if you have any referrals, please let us know. You can reach us through the Family Justice Center, and we have our links on the website. And I think that's all I have if there's any questions.
All right. Thank you, Sharon. As Sharon shared earlier, she is 2 months into this job. She just started with us 2 years ago, and we are lucky to have her. And as you could tell, she brings a lot of experience and passion. So that's a good thing. And yes, we are just lucky here in Contra Costa County with so many caring people who work here. So speaking of caring people, I want to bring our next presenter, Rosa Maria Sternberg. And Rosa Maria has so much experience in creating this community-based program. So please tell us, Rosa.
Okay, I'm going to try to share here. Let's see. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, I'm Rosa Maria Sternberg. Like Susan, thank you for your lovely introduction. So Susan and I have been working now for several years together on some some of these programs that we have in the community. And right now we have been working with not only with Family Justice Center, but other organizations in the community as well. So MPA, or Mentes Positivas, this has an English name and a Spanish name. MPA stands for Mind, Power, and Action, and also stands for Mentes Positivas en Acción, because the program is given in Spanish as well as in English. And I started this back in 2014 when I was part of a program. I'm a professor at University of California in San Francisco and the School of Nursing. And together with my colleagues at this School of Medicine, we started with some programs that we were thinking about doing in the community in what we call the Aging in Diverse Communities, which is an institute within the School of Medicine at UCSF. So I work with them, and we collaborated together with my colleagues, and we came up with this idea. So what is MPA? Is basically a culturally and linguistically tailored educational and mental health program delivered in the community by trained community health workers. So it's not delivered by psychologists or any kind of psychiatrist or counselor or anything. These are community health workers which we train. The program, as I mentioned, was developed in 2014. It's when we partner with Monument Impact, which is a community-based organization in Concord. We also partner with John Muir, and recently, for the last 5 years, we have also partnered with Kaiser and with Contra Costa County. In 2014, we trained our first 10 promotores, which are Latinx community health workers, and we conducted 2 studies. We did a feasibility and an effectiveness study of MPA, which is published in the Journal of Health Equity in 2019 and 2021. In 2020, we converted MPA into a virtual program so that we could respond to the COVID-19 crisis and bring this program to folks via Zoom, actually. In 2024, we partnered with Family Justice Center, and we developed MPA BIPOC and BIPOC youth community trained, and we trained 10 BIPOC CHWs. In 2024, we also developed MPA4 for the Latinx community, and we trained 18 additional promotores. So we've celebrated last year 10 years of MPA, and we have trained over 10 years. We've trained over 35 community health workers, and we have served over 1,500 folks in the community. These are some of our major partners: Monument Impact, John Muir, in 2014, and then, as I mentioned, in 2024, Family Justice Center became, again, partners.
Rosa Maria,
Yes.
your slides are not advancing.
They're not what?
Then I'm moving forward. I still see only the first page of your slide.
Oh, really? They're not moving there either?
No, I just see the first page of your slide. But I mean, your presentation so far has been very clear, but just
No, but I like for you to see that because you
It
still see
doesn't
only the
appear
first
that you're
page?
on, you're not, it doesn't appear you're on slideshow.
Oh, because I have it on slideshow. It's not connected to my slideshow, you mean? No? Let's see, I'm
Well,
gonna
you would
stop
have
sharing and I'm gonna try again. So let's see. That's interesting. So maybe
try again.
I'm gonna try again, yeah. So if I share. Do you see it now moving?
Yes, there we go.
So
Yeah.
maybe I won't do it in the slideshow. I'll just do it one by one.
Sure.
Like
Yes, so
Because I'm afraid that if I turn it into the slideshow from the beginning, it may happen again. Okay, so here was the first slide. Then, do you see it now? You see them?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So again, the culturally and linguistically tailored educational program, that's what MPA is. And here was the presentation that I referred to of the history, basically, of MPA that was developed in 2014 and recently in 2024. I'm going to just skip to go to the end so that I don't go over it again. We partner with Family Justice Center and we developed a BIPOC MPA, and we train BIPOC community health workers and BIPOC youth community health workers. So that's what we have been doing this past year. So we celebrated 10 years of MPA, and as I mentioned, we trained over 35 community health workers and we serve over 1,500 community members. These are our major partners up until 2024 when Family Justice Center became our partner as well. Some of the other partners that we have in the community include Pittsburgh Unified School District, Family Justice Center, Oakley Unified School District, First Five in Concord, and First Five in Pittsburgh. These are some pictures of our trainings that we do with community health workers. And here's a picture of our BIPOC community health workers graduating this past June in 2024. So what is culturally tailored program, or cultural tailoring, as many of the presenters referred to it already, but it's basically adapting, or culturally tailoring refers to culturally sensitive modifications adapted to a group's traditional worldviews, about adapting it to their reality, to their living conditions, and their perspectives. And that's what we do with this program. So Mind, Power, and Action, or MPA, is a weekly 2-hour class, in person or virtual, for 8 weeks. And they're interactive classes delivered by trained community health workers who are culturally and linguistically alike. We have a maximum of 8 participants per cohort to ensure a safe space, and we provide snacks. The framework for MPA is based on therapeutic frameworks that have to do with cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, dialectic behavioral therapy, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, and positive psychology. All these 5 therapeutic frameworks are included in the program. So what is the content? That are basically effective tools for the management of stress, anxiety, and depression. We offer tools and techniques to better manage difficult thoughts and emotions, how to make decisions based on what is important to you, values and goals, How are they different? Clarify your values and set goals. How to develop and maintain positive and fulfilling relationships, and how to better manage problems and live a more fulfilled life. That's what MPA is about. So we also measure, we have metrics that we follow within our programs. We measure levels of stress, anxiety, depression, perceived racial stress, and self-efficacy before and after the completion of the program. Some of these, like depression, anxiety, and stress, we have been measuring for the last 10 years. And the program has consistently been effective in lowering the levels of perceived stress, anxiety, and depression of participants. It's very encouraging. So here's an example of what happened last year, and with MPA, with the Latinx community, we had 62% of folks that participated in MPA in 2024 reported a lower level of stress after they completed the program. And here we have 67% of folks that participated in the program reported a change with their anxiety going down after completing the program. And 62.8% depression symptoms went down after completing the program. And the goal of MPA is developing psychological flexibility. So we try to go from folks that might be in a situation where they're being psychologically inflexible to becoming psychologically flexible. And we offer the opportunity to learn tools and develop mental flexibility, build psychological fortitude, which is mental strength, to live the life we want to be living. And that's what MPA is about. Now, within the program itself, the other outcome that we have had throughout the 10 years is the development and transformation of the CHWs, where they become true leaders in the community by supporting their fellow community members. And this transformation that I have seen in these folks after they're trained is just very rewarding, because they truly become community leaders by being able to not only help themselves to learn the skills and improve their mental health and their emotional health, but also those in the community where they live and of people like them. And that's what I have for you tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Now I bring back Caitlin from Contra Costa Crisis Center to briefly go over different services and programs offered by Contra Costa Crisis Center. And Caitlin is going to be our last speaker. Go ahead, Caitlin.
Thank you, everybody. Gosh, what a wonderful panel you curated, Susan. Amazing. We're so lucky to live in Contra Costa. Well, hi again, everybody. I already spoke a little bit about how the agency I work for, the Contra Costa Crisis Center, we answer the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, a national hotline available 24/7, 365. If you or someone you know is going through a mental health crisis, needs someone to talk to, a kind ear. In addition, our agency also answers the 211 information and referral line, which connects folks to local resources throughout Contra Costa County. It could be resources like, I'm facing homelessness and I need kind of help on guidance on what's available in Contra Costa County, or help, PG&E is sending me huge bills and I'm getting behind, right? What resources are out there for that? and even something as little as, do you have like free pet food? Because I can't pay for my pet's food this month. Big or small, it's probably in our database. And I think it's a real service that our agency answers both the crisis national line and also the national 211 resource guidance line as well, because they go hand in hand. They truly do. As we all know, if you're struggling to get your basic needs met, your mental health is probably in not tip-top shape. So definitely it's great to have a crisis counselor available to answer that call as well. And we refer folks to NAMI and Family Justice Center day in and day out, and all of these amazing agencies. So, we're happy to kind of spread the love. Last but certainly not least, something that gets kind of overlooked within our agency is our grief groups that we offer for free in the evenings, facilitated by trained volunteers. So it's not a clinical thing. We're not providing therapy in those groups. It's just peer-based support, kind of helping navigate the challenges of grief, right? And you can get connected to that by calling 211 as well. But that's it. That's it. That's all we do. But no, that's
a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much, Caitlin. And thanks again to our presenters for putting together really a very informative and really inspiring workshop. And I appreciate all of you for taking this evening hours to be here to learn together. And Gigi has raised her hand, so I'm going to give her the floor.
I would be remiss if I didn't share that the important role faith and spirituality plays is an essential wellness tool for so many individuals. Often when they call us, they're asking us to pray. And because I was on the floor of the assembly and our own local representative, Lori Wilson, assembly member, prayed, I said, I'm not going to leave that behind, because most people don't understand the idea of separation of church and state. Prayer is very much requested, especially for community members who call us from the African American and Latinx community. That's one of the first things they ask us if we can do for them. And whether we're breaking a rule or not, we do it. So that and support people to find resources in their own faith community without proselytizing. That's essential. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Phil?
Yes, first of all, thank you very much for a lot of good information this evening. I am so very joyful, blessed, and happy to be part of NAMI Contra Costa and the work we're doing. And just so to let you know, my investment in the community is to be able to help our kids who have uncertainty, fear, and doubt right now about a lot of things, especially with the rhetoric that is so just blatant. And I have PTSD. And I tell people that, I say, it's not the PTSD you think I have. This came in 1955 after the Brown versus Board of Education decision. It's called post-traumatic segregation disorder. I was completely happy in my colored school before I had to go to the white school, and was told what to know my place, boy. And people can begin to tell me their expectations for me, and I heard that. The one thing on talking about Jade mentioned a man throwing up because of his issues. Little known fact: Bill Russell, one of the greatest basketball players of all time, threw up before every game, and until he threw up, his team, the Boston Celtics, were reticent to take the court. So he's not ready until he throws up. So that was a positive sign for him to be able to do that. But my wounds are not walls. And I've learned to not make them walls to prevent me from learning and contributing whatever way I can. I'm one of those people that I'm talking to a child that's 6 or 7 years old, I'll get down on one knee and talk to them, come to their level, because nobody ever came to my level. But I thank you and congratulations. March the 19th will mark 10 years since I had a piece of the Family Justice Center grand opening cake there in Concord. So nice way to go, Susan.
Well, thank you with that. Once again, I really appreciate all of you for being here together to learn together. And obviously you care for someone in your life, in your community. So we're gonna make the recording, PowerPoint slides, and contact information available to all of you. We're going to send them out tomorrow, and so that you could also share the love. So thank you. And it's time for dinner. Let's go and have dinner. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye. Thank you, thank you, thank you.